Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Fight for the Future live stream. Today, we're going to be discussing Amazon's surveillance empire and the way that organizations and regular people are fighting it and can get involved and participate in continuing that fight. As always, if you enjoy this content, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications so that you can find out when we go live in the future. And also, if you want to sort of sidestep the YouTube algorithm, you're also welcome to text live to 68788, and we'll text you when the stream starts. And I'm actually going to go ahead and send that text right now because I forgot to do it before I went live. Okay, so we've got two guests today, and the first one that I'll introduce is Raphael Shimunov. Raphael is an artist and activist in Queens whose first experience with warehouse work was at Toys R Us. And he first experienced opposing Amazon when Jeff Bezos decided Queens would be home to their new headquarters. Through that victory, its organizers and those across the nation opposing Amazon everywhere founded Athena, a coalition of 50 plus frontline community and advocate groups representing over 1 million people, where Raphael serves as director of communications. I'm also introducing today Emiliano Falcon-Morano. Emiliano is the Policy Council for Technology for Liberty program at the ACLU of Massachusetts. He was born and raised in Argentina. At the ACLU of Massachusetts, he seeks to think about and address the legal and policy concerns that the information age entails by contributing to create and change its regulatory landscape. Emiliano's task is to develop policy and regulatory schemes that promote equality, open internet, balanced intellectual property rights, respect for privacy, and universal access to services. His main concern is with the design of new technologies and the potential transmission of historical discrimination and bias against traditionally opposed groups of people, such as people of color, women, and sexual, religious, and ethnic minorities. Thank you guys for joining today. I guess I'm going to just jump right into it with the first question, and this is posed to both of you, but what is surveillance capitalism?
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm so glad of being here. Well, that's a really good question to start off this conversation. Basically, surveillance capitalism describes this market-driven process where the commodity for sale is our personal data, right? And the capture and production of this data relies on mass surveillance of the internet. So basically, the surveillance capitalism is this stage of capitalism as a mode of production that we are living in, where our personal data becomes commodified with the purpose of making a profit, right? And this process is driven mostly by some of the biggest tech companies that what they do is they collect our behavioral data and they use that data for purposes of advertising, for creating new products. So basically, surveillance capitalism is the next stage of the capitalism. The original capitalism was joining capital and labor to create goods and services, but now what's being commodified is not a good itself, but it's our personal data, especially our behavioral data.
Yeah, I feel like, thank you for having me as well. I feel like in terms of Amazon specifically, people normally depict this even generally as like something emerging because of technology, but what's really happening, it's being more uncovered, and it's long existed before our time. Like one of the most common thing Amazon workers, warehouse workers tell us, and drivers too, most of who are Black and brown, is that their workplace is so easily compared to a plantation. And surveillance capitalism, you could argue, was very much present in those times as well. So being careful, of course, not to compare completely to slavery, but just as a component of it, as one of the tools of it. Surveillance capital is just showing itself as a threat to everyone in different degrees, of course, but it's manifested to the smallest thing, the smallest appearing thing, like to my daughter and screen addiction, right? And how it's engineered to promote that, to deportation of my family as immigrants, or my neighbors as Black and brown people to prisons. So it isn't like only using unregulated dominance over democracy to like record everything you do. It's using that information to make us do things, to compel us to do things we otherwise wouldn't do, to bring us false choices, to make us feel like we're choosing when we're really being pushed one way or the other, to do things we would have never agreed to do if asked directly.
Yeah,
I've often heard it referred to as sort of like a digital sleight of hand, where it really does appear that we're being served like very specific information and we're making very definitive choices, but we actually don't have the ability to see the limitations of the choices that were actually offered.
Yeah, and adding to what Raphael was mentioning, I think the surveillance capitalism is a multi-layered phenomenon. It's a very extractivist phenomenon, not only from the natural resources perspective, because all the servers and all these like big warehouses with data servers, they use a lot of things that come from the environment, right? From the lithium. So it's not only extractivist from that point of view, but also it's extractivist of our data, right? And it also uses this component of labor, which is often hidden behind the narrative of the disruption, right? So there's like this narrative, this like Silicon Valley push narrative of disruption that hides and covers what is behind. And behind there is an army of workers that are repressed, as Raphael was mentioning. There is all this harvesting of minerals that is used to create all this technology. So I think it's an interesting discussion, right? What's behind the surveillance capitalism, and this also narrative that includes the AI, and it has a lot of components that it's very interesting to kind of like unpack, right?
Yeah, definitely. Raphael, you had mentioned workers. Could you tell me a little bit about the All Eyes on Amazon campaign?
Yeah, All Eyes on Amazon started, actually like the precursor of All Eyes on Amazon really was this incredible work by Fight for the Future and Media Justice and others who are part of Athena's coalition and helped start it. And that really got real main attention during the George Floyd uprisings and BLM. And during that moment, Amazon did this thing, which a lot of corporations are doing right now with LGBTQ rights and other things, where they're washing their brand with support, performative support of movements in very superficial ways. And what Amazon did was plaster the BLM message all over its properties during that moment in history. And Media Justice and others, Fight for the Future, like confronted them on that pretty aggressively and said, like, how can you do that with 2,000 police contracts across the country, including literally opening one after the killing of George Floyd, like minutes away from where he was killed. So that actually forced them into this dilemma where they were forced to offer a moratorium on their facial recognition technology in particular. And this is also on the heels of their previous work, those groups' previous work under hashtag anti-Black Amazon, where they were uncovering Amazon's really obvious targeting of Black people, Black communities, Black workers, Black workers in the warehouse, including Black workers in the higher echelons of the corporate work. And in that scenario, when they paused it, it opened up an opportunity to be like, oh, okay, so you have a 1-year moratorium because it's obviously racist. And so when does it stop being racist? After a year? It's like you're going to re-enable it and now it's not racist anymore. So Eyes on Amazon was created to create like a countdown on that moratorium ending and putting pressure on Amazon to make it indefinite and to ban or end its facial recognition technology. So upon launching that campaign, which was like full of like public education actions, all sorts of things, Amazon actually kind of folded. They did it wisely. They didn't wait for the end of the countdown. They tried to undercut it by extending the moratorium indefinitely, as they said, in response. So to save themselves the embarrassment of doing so in the peak of this campaign, but they still haven't banned it outright. And what we're asking for is banning. So Eyes on Amazon is really a big umbrella term for a lot of actions and a lot of different direct actions as well as digital actions to really hold their feet to the fire and educate and pressure our electeds to really ban this technology outright throughout the country.
So the moratorium that Amazon has now, you're saying, extended indefinitely. Does that moratorium include not sharing information with with entities like the FBI, ICE, various intelligence agencies, or say, like, I know there are some, like, with like private law enforcement type groups or any, does their moratorium exclude those groups, or are they just...
No, it doesn't exclude them. It just excludes local law enforcement. Many who still have their own facial recognition systems, many who are still provided with footage that they can feed into their systems through Amazon Ring cameras. The result of the anti-surveillance orgs who helped start and run Athena was this kind of, again, performative action, this war of attrition where we have to fight for every version of what we want back to back to back. So what the end game is the total ban.
Yes, and added to what Raphael was mentioning about the moratorium. Well, first of all, when the moratorium only covers the use of recognition, which is Amazon's facial recognition system, and it only covers police departments. It does not cover any federal agency, the FBI, DHS, ICE. We actually know from public reporting that the FBI trialed recognition at some point, but the company is not saying anything about its relationship with the federal government. It only cabins the moratorium to the police departments and the use of recognition. But as Raphael said, right, they are not cutting the ties that they have through Amazon Ring. They are not cutting the ties that they have through the use of AWS. So there is this kind of like double standard that the company has, like front-facing. They're like, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ rights matter, right? We're going to impose this moratorium. But on the back end, they are still having these very, very shady ties with these law enforcement agencies, with these intelligence agencies. This is what we have to, what Athena, right, and this coalition of Eyes on Amazon and is working on, and what we are working on, because it's very bad, right? They are really harming our communities.
So before I ask the next question, I'm noticing there's a good number of people watching the live stream right now, and I want to invite you to ask questions in the chat if you're curious about anything. We are always checking that, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to throw them in to the stream. My next question is sort of back to workers, and a topic that I find actually really fascinating and kind of horrifying in its implications for workers outside of Amazon, all over the world. What types of we've talked about the types of surveillance that Amazon subjects the public to, but what type of surveillance are Amazon workers subjected to in warehouses, and also the Amazon drivers, because they are subjected to pretty significant surveillance by Amazon. Can you guys give us some details on that?
I want to say before Raphael answers this that Amazon's model of surveillance is twofold, right? There is a surveillance outside to its users and consumers, and there is surveillance inside to its workers. This is very, very typical of Amazon. The surveillance, the front-facing surveillance, so the surveillance of their users is through the behavioral data that I was talking before, right? Amazon uses the data from their customers to copy products, to kind of like put their products in a cheaper price than the original products, so that the customers will not end up buying Amazon products. So they do a lot of these like marketplace techniques using surveillance data. And I will allow Raphael to talk about the worker surveillance because that's his métier.
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest piece of the worker surveillance and everything, you know, thumbs up to everything you just shared about breaking it up that way and how they actually work together. It's really helpful to illustrate kind of like what our organizers call like the Panopticon, right? The key piece in the worker area is something called rate and TOT. And it is used to time workers' efficiency to the most minute levels of measurement. So their pace and their rate and their time off task. That's what TOT stands for. Like, so like imagine throughout your workday, whatever it is, that someone is constantly measuring and defining what time off task is for you. You're a human being, but you're being measured by a robot as a robot. And then accumulating all that 3 seconds extra you spent getting this, 2 seconds extra you done doing this, accumulating that at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, to build a report about how much money you have cost Amazon on that collective, you know, minutes wasted, not picking. Literally, they call it picking, not picking the items.
Right?
Yes, yes. And in fact, some of the patents that Amazon has taken around that, which kind of illustrate what they're trying to achieve. Like there is one patent, literally, you could look it up on Twitter under Amazon patent wrist, if you just look that up. And that's like a wristband that would measure even the geographic kind of distance that you're choosing and your decisions to fill different boxes and racks with the items and the choices you're making about going left to right versus up and down and the rate in which you do that. In addition, during that same period, Amazon had filed a patent for constructing a cage to move a worker efficiently through the warehouse, where the worker sits literally in a cage that's moved around in order to decide those rates for them. And then like the really important piece about this is, to a lot of people, when I describe this or when workers describe this to people, when I worked at a warehouse, like we've never had anything even close to that, even at the behemoth like Toys R Us was. But the way that they see it is, oh, they're just measuring efficiency. People are going to lay off the jobs. They're not going to, you know, they're going to be replaced by robots if they don't do this. And the reality is the robots introduction, AI, including AI and those things, is really to make, not to replace the human, it's to make the human as robotic as possible. And to actually, like what we've seen is to break them and dispose of workers at a rate. Like some people say, oh, they pay $15 an hour, which most people don't know that's actually lower than the average for warehouse workers. However, that $15 is like it's like a vacuum suction, because they need that powerful suction to bring in workers, because they're so rapidly ejecting workers on the other end who are broken physically from rate and TOT. So there's this effort right now. There's a petition on daily costs that we could share in the comments to end rate TOT. And then you asked about the drivers. That's all like very much similar, where there's AI-powered cameras on 24/7, constantly measuring every minutia that you can imagine: speed, acceleration, you know, when you put your belt on, when you took it off, where you're looking up, when you're looking down. Every Amazon driver has to actually consent to releasing their biometric data in order to stay employed by Amazon. And of course, that too is try to be rationalized by saying, well, it's about safety. And in reality, we know that Amazon almost never invests in safety, in the conventional safety measures. They jump through it. When you meet an Amazon driver, they'll admit to you like, oh, I had this much training. They weren't prepared as much as like a FedEx or UPS driver is trained. Very fractional amount of time to that. Instead, they're invested in these surveillance systems, which not only are used to push them like robots, but also as punishment. It gives them power to get rid of you based on this algorithm that they only see, that they only have the secret sauce to. So a lot of our people who speak up against Amazon not using their technology to track COVID in their warehouses, and in some warehouses, there was 4 or 5 times the rate of COVID than in the community outside that were exposed internally by leaks in Minneapolis, for example, and Minnesota, right? And instead of using that technology for their safety, it's used to fire the workers who were talking and speaking up about unionization, speaking up about COVID safety, speaking up about being paid fairly, or the abuse of Prime Day. So really, it's under this theater of security, theater of efficiency, but really it's all about controlling and using human beings like disposable batteries.
Yeah, this is exactly, and I want to add two things to what Raphael was mentioning. First of all, is that part of my job is looking at Amazon patents, and I can assure you that there's like pretty much scary tech being patented these days. And second of all, I want to also contextualize this. These worker surveillance issues are not new, right? Henry Ford, the original Henry Ford, he used to have an army of investigators that would like show up at the workers' house to control their spending habits, how much they drink, if they have like a clean home. So what we are seeing now, it's basically an upgrade of that worker surveillance that already existed, but taken to a whole new level, right? Because of what we are mentioning at the beginning, which is surveillance capitalism, and how much behavioral data there is available now for corporations to collect about us and about their workers.
So, Raphael, you organized a digital rally on Prime Day around this rate TOT issue. Can you give me a little detail about how that went, and you know, the where you guys were present and stuff like that?
Yeah, that was one of the actions. Normally, the actions are started by workers and moved by workers. And this one was definitely led by workers and the worker orgs that make up Athena's coalition. However, because of the nature of Prime Day, you cannot imagine a lot of workers with any kind of free time or energy, or even after work, being able to throw down as normally. So what really like heartened me was the hand raisers, the allies who came in solidarity for the workers, who kind of like confront this fake holiday with an opportunity to really educate their communities about what it does, what Prime Day does. And just to put Prime Day in perspective, Amazon without Prime Day is over twice the injury rate as any other warehouses in the country. And in fact, you could even draw a line where the ones with more technology and robots actually have even more injuries, proving the assumption of why they're there. So what we did is we started a campaign called Amazon Hurts. So you could kind of follow the dialogue and the actions. I think people from over 80 cities signed up and hung banners, did wheat pastes, covered their communities with these reminders of like the true price of of Amazon Prime, and that helped also start conversations about the full, even fuller price through workers, but also in communities and to the climate and everything. So really, generally, it was 2 days of these distributive actions where people signed up, like ordinary people who, when we started Athena, when we would message about these kind of things, people would maybe like unsubscribe. They would be like, "Oh, I signed up because I'm concerned about the climate, and you're asking me about workers, so I'm out of here." Or I'm concerned because of anti-racism, and you're asking me about monopoly, so I'm out of here. So like what our mission at Athena was to really to do that intersectional argument, to really bring together how all those things are connected. So at this Prime Day, when we did that call to action, no one unsubscribed. People raised their hands. They printed and created their own things. They received things that when they asked that we wanted them to send, and they launched these kind of actions, including the culmination of them, which was a virtual party where we all just got together at night on a Zoom, and we sent out a projector van with the help of this amazing ally, Patrick Young, and they projected on top of Jeff Bezos' famed 25 bathroom mansion in DC, projected the videos from workers, comments from workers on his house. People who joined us were able to just tweet and type up what they wanted to be projected. And then also we sent a signal to the future CEO, the figurehead CEO that's going to replace Jeff Bezos, and that's Andy Jassy in Seattle, where we circled his neighborhood with a LCD van with those same messages. So like what we tried to do there is try to kind of flip this holiday as a commemoration to workers, and how the system that Amazon Prime is to break them. If you noticed, one extremely disturbing thing that Amazon launched before this Prime Day was in response to people talking about how dangerous it is to work at Amazon, especially during Prime Day. They started sharing imagery and memes and things about how their workers have to prepare like they're going to go on a triathlon, and how we're cheering them on, and that their customers have to exercise their fingers to buy all these great deals. Like it was kind of like dystopian how they were describing the precursor to this holiday, to the fake holiday.
And do you think that there's a significant risk of these types of TOT systems making their way into other companies, and even outside of the context of warehouses?
Yeah, the one thing you can count on with Amazon is they will also profit from killing you. Like every stage of you falling down because of their preying on your business or on your community, they're going to profit from every stage that you fall down. So like Amazon will monetize helping other businesses survive Amazon. We will kill you. And while we kill you, here's what we'll do to slow it down, and it'll cost you. And here's what we do to slow it down even more, and it'll cost you. And then you're gone, and it'll cost you. And then, so I feel like definitely it is, because it's patenting those things, it's not only protecting others people from using it, but it's also, I think, we can talk about it further, that it can also be licensed, and also changes the culture of what's expected by boardrooms across the country, where they're going to hold now other facilities, Walmart and other places, to this other standard that's been normalized by Amazon. And then you could be charged with, not being, not serving your shareholders in your legal capacity unless you match what Amazon has normalized in terms of how to make workers work.
So let's shift to Ring for a second. So I think a lot of people who have an Amazon Ring think of it as the device that lets them see who's at the front door, see if they got packages, and maybe check who made that noise outside or whatever. But I don't think a lot of people think of them as the mass surveillance devices that they are. And I'm sure both of you would have a lot to say about this, but could you both sort of detail the ways in which Amazon Ring sort of steps out of being just a handy tool that you can put in front of your house and actually becomes a tool of oppression and mass surveillance?
Well, I can take that. Well, actually, Ring is one of the biggest surveillance infrastructures in America currently. So the problem with Ring is that it kind of like undermines our civil rights and our civil liberties in a way that before Ring, right? For example, if a police officer wanted information from me or like a footage from a private camera, a security camera that I have in my house, they would have needed a warrant or either me going directly and giving the material to the police department, right? Now, what Ring provides is basically a platform where all these security cameras are connected, and there is an app called Neighbors, which is the Neighbors app, where neighbors, right, upload their videos and crime alerts, and the police departments have access to these networks. So now, if you upload a video to this kind of like, it's like a kind of like a Facebook, it's like a kind of like a social media platform, then you are voluntarily giving this footage and you are voluntarily giving this to the police department. So now the police department don't need a warrant or go through any judge whatsoever to get access to that information, right? And even if you don't upload it, because you as a user, you have a choice to not upload the footage, Amazon Ring receives subpoenas and legal requests from investigators and from police departments, and they can still access this information. So there are like these like two channels by which law enforcement can access this information, which are like it comes very handy for them, right? Because they don't have to go to a judge anymore.
So are you saying that if you have images captured that you didn't necessarily upload to Neighbors, there are processes where the police can gain access to that? And would the user that captured that footage even know? Is there some sort of an opt-in process, or if you're on Ring, is all of your content being put into a server that is accessible by the police?
So that's a little bit more complex because that depends on the type of information that is being sought by law enforcement. So in some cases, the customer will be given notice, but in other cases, the customer is not given notice because at the end of the day, Amazon is a company, right? And the government can obtain records from companies. This is regulated by a federal statute called the ECPA, which is the Electronic Communication Privacy Act. So Amazon falls under this statute. So in this way, by this kind of like court, it has kind of like a framework of that goes from less information to more information and involves court orders, subpoenas, warrants. It's a traditional ECPA that if the government wants information from a Facebook user, they will go through Facebook, right? This is the same, but the difference here is that they're going to Amazon. They're looking for information about the person's account, and information that pertains to the person's account is the footage from the Ring camera.
So in what ways does Ring perpetuate racism and violate civil liberties? Can we detail that a little bit?
So I think that one of the worst things of Ring is that it undermines the trust, the community trust, because we're seeing people uploading things that, oh, we saw this man walking around the neighborhood and he seems sketchy, and this man is black, right? So it kind of like perpetuates these like stereotypes of things, like whereas before, right, someone would like call the police when a black person was strolling down the neighborhood. Now, apart from calling the police, they will upload to the Neighbors app, oh, there is a sketchy man going around the neighborhood, right? So I think that these are the most harmful societal consequences of Ring, this kind of like undermining of trust with our own neighbors, right? That is not safety. Surveillance is not safety. Safety is built on community trust, on a community understanding, right? So I think that Amazon Ring undermines all of this.
Yeah, it's like a social engineering project. It's shrouding, these cutesy videos of Amazon workers dancing while they drop off a package, right? So like end to end, it's doing this triple propaganda, and it's feeding the lizard brain impulses about like this world where you die if you're not eternally vigilant about everything at all times. It casts anyone as a suspect first rather than a neighbor, and it centers policing rather than care. Like as we as a society are trying to be more cognizant of like, well, like what is the root of all of our struggles. And policing is clearly not the solution, but it is re-engineering, it is engineering the reverse. It's taking us to medieval times with the most modern technology.
And also want to say that Amazon fits this model of policing. We've seen, we filed a lot of public records requests here in Massachusetts, and we saw a lot of emails by which Amazon representatives reach out to police departments and to police officers, and they kind of look like influencers. So cops become influencers of Amazon Ring. There was a big story about this published last week in the Los Angeles Times about how in the Los Angeles area, Amazon Ring was trying to bring cops to be influencers by giving away free cameras, by giving away free things. We've seen the same thing here in Massachusetts. So that's a pattern. And that means that if they are selling this to law enforcement, it's because this works for law enforcement, right? And if law enforcement is accepting these cameras, right, and law enforcement is activating all these trials, these free trials, then this is not good. This is not good for the community.
Yeah, there's a direct correlation with how they treat competitors, where they didn't care about diapers, but they suddenly did when diapers.com was still around after Amazon. And what they did was they offered to buy diapers.com, and the diapers was like, no, we're good. And instead they said, okay, you got the warning. So then they dropped all their prices on diapers. They gave it a bunch of freebies to new parents, and slowly killed diapers.com until it's gone and gobbled up. And now they own that market. And the public story is, oh, they outperformed, they outcompeted, or parents need them. And it's like, it's funny to see that they also just apply the same thing to something as critical as public trust and health and safety. And by creating and infusing itself into systems by cutting and basically giving away things at a damage to them financially in the beginning, but at a great reward later at the end, when there is no more choice because they're integrated through so many systems.
Yeah, basically surveillance capitalism in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying, Raphael, brings up an interesting point where I almost feel like I'm lacking vocabulary to describe exactly what Amazon is, because when the way that you talk about it, that them breaking into multiple industries and dominating, it almost feels as if monopoly isn't even an appropriate term, because they are becoming a monopoly in multiple industries. I don't know if there's a term for that. I would love to know it if there is such a term, but
there is.
what is it?
There's a few terms, right? So like, first of all, just on scale alone, it's like more of a nation state, right, than a company, one with its own spy agency, as noted earlier, literally hiring former intelligence officers, including placing the head of the NSA, behind the big historic leaks as like a leader in their organization. AWS itself, their cloud service, as a backbone for much of it, but also like there's another aspect called monopsony. And monopsony was a new term to me. We have a lot of economists and small business leaders who are part of Athena, as well as worker organizations and anti-surveillance fighters. And they are teaching me about this other thing called monopsony. And it's created when there's an increasingly single buyer of goods, which gives them now the monopoly side of domination, but also the side where they get to dictate from both ends everything. So, you know, being able to, all of these small businesses now, in order to survive, have to be on Amazon. All of the customers already are on Amazon, have credit cards on Amazon, have already invested on Prime membership, so they're going to go to Amazon. So now they control the market from multiple ways. So there's so many. I would say it's a nation state trying to be like, except, you know, with that pesky thing called voting and regulations and democracy, it's a nation state. And then in addition, a monopoly and a monopsony. And what we've seen today is people, you know, still learning about the word, including me, monopsony, but now the idea of it as a monopoly is actually hitting mainstream, where even President Joe Biden appointed recently, this is a huge victory for our coalition, appointed Lena Khan, this FTC chair, who is a fighter for ordinary people, not a Wall Street lackey at all. And she would be the enforcer, antitrust enforcer in the country. In addition, now the House and the Senate did investigations and found the monopolistic kind of abuses. And the House recently, this week, just now, yesterday, basically voted on and passed these five or six bills called the big tech bills, which are aimed at drawing down that monopoly. But yeah, there's so many terms we could throw at this.
So Emiliano, could you describe some of the public records requests that you've made and some of the interesting discoveries that you've come across through that process?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we basically did a lot of public records requests about Amazon Ring and the relationship police departments have, and we found these that I was talking before, right? All these kind of like emails and solicitations and Amazon PR people just reaching out to like normal low-level police officers with this kind of like grandiose solution, right? Which is Amazon Ring, and telling them, hey, here, look, we have this new product. Do you want to try it? It's like a trial. It's just a trial. We've seen the same thing with a company called Clearview AI, which is a company that provides facial recognition services. It's the same kind of business technique, which is like approaching to police departments, usually low-level police officers. Even we have some cases. We even had cases where the chief of police and the record access officer didn't know that the low-level police officers were in communication with these companies. Wow. And they were just like accepting trials and like setting up accounts. So we had one case where they sent us the answer to our public records request, and like 1 week after they wrote us back and they were like, oh, sorry, we just found this, but we didn't know we had this, because the police officer has like just accepted. And you know, it's like really easy nowadays to accept a trial. You just have to click like a link. So this is very concerning, because this is totally outside public view. There is no oversight, there is no accountability, there is no transparency, there is nothing. So that's why in our campaign we are pushing for this community control over police surveillance, this kind of SICOPS ordinances, and actually they work, because we passed that ordinance in Cambridge a couple of years ago. And then we found out through our public records request that at the time that the ordinance was being passed, they were in communications with Ring. And after the ordinance passed, the police officers were like, oh no, we cannot go on. We cannot go with this anymore, because now we have this ordinance and we will have to go through like a lengthy process of like community involvement, of the city council involvement, of just explaining, right? Because the people have the right to know what surveillance technologies are being used against them. So this is basically what we found in our public records requests. Then we found these kind of like partnerships, this like public, what we call public-private surveillance partnerships. between police departments and Amazon that are done through this Neighbors app. So there is a very integrated system, I would say. And Amazon and its representatives, they kind of like really know how to approach police departments. So that's why we need more oversight and more accountability, more transparency. You know, as the Justice Brandeis used to say, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
So when I was reviewing some of the links that you provided, one thing that I saw was it was a patent that detailed Amazon working on sort of a multi-camera facial recognition system. Are you familiar with that? And it seems like it was tailor-made for Ring because you're going to have all these cameras all over the place. Can you detail that a little bit and maybe go into the sort of very concerning capabilities of a system like that if it were deployed?
Yes, sure. Well, yeah, that patent, I think that was like 2 years ago, right? Yes, that was actually when Ring was starting, and it was during when recognition was in full force. There was like no moratorium. So this patent, it would like generate composite images using 2D and 3D. If you had like one camera here, right, and the other camera here, and both of them getting the same thing, then you could just like create kind of like a new image from those original kind of from that footage. So we thought that was very concerning back then, because of Ring, right? Imagine having a full neighborhood, right, packed with Amazon Ring cameras, and then this all the images and all the video recording from these cameras could come together to form new images, creating a pretty scary panopticon, right? Which I think that also that's a really good word to describe Amazon, right, as a panopticon. And other tech companies also, right? I mean, Amazon is not the only one. Amazon is one of the biggest one, but there are also other companies that are pretty much kind of like a panopticon style. So yeah, we thought that was very concerning, but that patent was like 2 years ago. Now they have like, you know, that's the thing. You were mentioning before that Amazon has like all these like kind of like different units. Like the business model has a lot of like units separate, but if they decide to use them all together, you know, that's the problem with Amazon being a monopoly, a monopsony. It's like using all this data they have of their customers, right? All this data they're collecting through Ring. Just imagine all the Ring footage from all the neighborhoods in America, right? That's huge to be under the control of one private company, right?
Emiliano, isn't there also like now something about video being like always fed, or some, I remember some discussion, I'm not familiar with it, but like now the next step would be that police could just basically go in and look at a neighborhood live at any moment through the Ring cameras. Is there some kind of I know naturally it seems like that's going to be the place to go technologically, but was there anything about that recently?
So I've not seen that through Ring. That is like normal CCTV cameras as a situation. What did happen a couple of weeks ago was that Amazon changed the way police departments can access Ring footage by creating this new thing, which are law enforcement requests. So now in the Neighbors app, in the platform, for your neighborhood, you will be able to see all the requests that the police department did of things pertaining to your neighborhood. This is a transparency measure, right? So transparency measures are good, right? We are in favor of transparency measures, but in this case, it's like having I don't know, someone from the clan and just like taking out the hood and you know who that person is. Well, yeah, that's a transparency, but that person is still from the clan. So transparency alone is not enough, right? There are like substantive issues that have to be addressed. We don't want to see how many. We want to see how many law enforcement requests are there. We don't want them to exist, right? So like shielding themselves in like this like fake transparency is, I think, it's a red herring, and it doesn't go to the discussion, which is why are they amassing all this information, and what for, right?
So for people who may not be familiar with the term, you were mentioning it earlier. Can you describe what Panopticon surveillance is?
It's from old like philosophy. It's I forget the name of the theorist, but it's this design of a prison, really, where everything is centralized in a way where no one can be invisible at any moment of their lives. So, you know, in a prison, you're always going to have more prisoners than guards. So it's a design that maximizes vision by a few people over the many.
So I think.
Yeah. Oh.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I just wanted to add that this comes from the Panopticon model of security was brought by Foucault and other philosophers in the 20th century, and it's like this model of prison by which, as Raphael was saying, there is someone in the middle that can basically see everyone all the time. So this is basically this Panopticon model where there is an all-seeing eye, just like seeing everything, and that was traditionally used in prisons, right? And now it's used also on the internet, right? Because they are kind of like seeing everything that we do. And what I would say that there is kind of like a difference now, because in the original Panopticon, the prisoners could not see themselves, right? But now we kind of have like the fake illusion that we are seeing each other, right? Especially with social media. So I think that this Panopticon model is even more dangerous, right?
Although I always also view it as kind of useful, because if we inverse it, if you inverse the model, it is the democracy that has all eyes on the people we lent power to, and we just have to flip it.
Yeah. But the thing is that now, what I would say to add to that is that they are seeing us, but we cannot see them. It's like one of those like glasses, you know, that they use to make interrogatories. It's like they can see us, but we cannot see the all-seeing eye. So that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to make people see this Panopticon, like break this barrier, right? That behind this narrative of like disruption, like this like technological determinism, that is like this narrative of technology as being necessary, of like we want AI. Well, maybe we just don't want AI. Like why? Like why do we need facial recognition? You know, like why? We should start asking ourselves those questions. Why, right?
And I think this is the perfect segue into our last topic of discussion. So I wanted to open with what is surveillance capitalism, and what I want to close on is a term, a question about a term that I see repeatedly in the Eyes on Amazon copy throughout, which is that we're fighting toward a world beyond policing, which is, I think, sort of what we're stepping toward in this conversation. So could you guys maybe describe exactly what that means, a world beyond policing, and you know, how you envision a future beyond policing?
Yeah, I mean, like the people who led this fight, like Mariam Kaba and others, who's the person who made me and many want to learn about abolition, reminds us that it's good to imagine a world beyond policing. However, and many parts must be imagined before being realized. However, a lot of it is already here. So like if you look in places where people's needs are met with housing and healthcare, unfortunately, those places are the Hamptons and parts of Beverly Hills and places where policing is pretty much abolished, rather successfully, except just not for everybody, right? So what a world looks like to me is one where it's not controversial to say that a prison is a reminder of our failures as a society, not a reminder of individual failures by members of our community and us. And that one day when people say public safety, they mean everybody, not, versus the opposite, where you see, like, for example, the thin blue line flag, and visually what that really communicates is that there's this eternal struggle between people who are bad and foreign and different, and people who are the silent, peaceful majority. And this thin, fragile blue line of policing that keeps those two apart, versus the vision of abolition. In my house, we don't have police. My daughter doesn't have a police. So the vision is in front of all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally right. And to add to that, I would say that I'm a lawyer. So from my legal background and my criminal law kind of studies, we live in an unfair society, right? We live in an unfair and unequal society, and we usually deal with the consequences of the society violently. So we just lock down people. We just use the police, which is an eminent violent force, right? Instead of addressing the roots, right? Instead of addressing the roots of the problem, right? We just deal with that violently. We have a person that has mental health issues in the street, and we call the police, right? And we call the police to beat the out of that person. So I think that a world beyond policing implies imagining a world where our economic needs, right, our substantial needs, housing, having food in the table, are met. This is not magic, right? In those communities where these needs are met, there is less crime than in those communities where these needs are not met. And to make matters worse, the police actually are harmful in some communities because they just take people, they lock people in, and they make these families enter into this circle of that derives like more inequality and more policing, and it's a snowball which we have to stop at some point. People have to have their needs met. If people have their needs met, crime will be reduced substantially, right? So people think that, oh, abolition is like they want to like just abolish the police. That's not, like, we're not saying that we are going to snap the fingers and one day like all police are going to be gone. It's just making people meet their needs in a way that they can develop, and they can develop their humanity. And to finish, to take away violence from our society, right? Because the most violent force in our society is the police right now.
So, and this obviously is posed to the both of you, but where can people keep up with you online? Where can people follow you on Twitter? And also, for what the both of you are working on, where can people find that work, and how can they participate and take action?
Well, I work at the SCLU of Massachusetts, and we have a blog that's privacysos.com. So they can go there. We usually post our actions, about things that we see. As you mentioned, the patent from Amazon, I made a blog post about that. And then they can follow me on Twitter. I'm at the last Falcon. So yes, just on the normal ACLU of Massachusetts landing page. That's a good resource. And national ACLU also.
Yeah, you could find me on Twitter at Raphael Shimino or IG at Rafternoon, but you really should follow Athena. It's Athena for All everywhere on all social media, including athenaforall.org, where I think you should sign up. And when you're signing up with us, you're signing up with a coalition of over 50 organizations, like Fight for the Future, like Media Justice, like people who are taking Empower Change, who are taking Public Citizen, taking these things head on. And from there, you will be able to participate in any way you'll feel comfortable with. And occasionally we'll remind you there's some other things you could do that may be less comfortable that we would love to talk to you about taking action and together making the adversaries uncomfortable. Yeah.
Raphael, Emiliano, thank you so much for joining me today. It was an incredibly interesting discussion. I really appreciate having you guys on, and hopefully we can have you back sometime. It was super fascinating, and just as a reminder to the audience, if you like content like this, please remember to like this video. I see 26 viewers and 17 likes. So remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications so that you can get alerted when we go live in the future. And if you want to sidestep the algorithm, you can always text live to 68788 and we will text you when the stream starts. I think that concludes this week's episode. Again, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much.
We will not be back at our regular time next week. We'll be back on Thursday instead of Friday. And if there are any changes, just keep an eye on our social media on Twitter and Instagram. And I think that about concludes it for today. So thank you guys very much. And we'll see everybody next week. Bye. Okay, we're off the air.